What I do is I will have to push the button each time again after 20 minutes. Circulating is a attendance list of both weeks, last week and today, and one of the recommended readings, a presidential order, which we will discuss halfway the class. Today we are in week 3, and in this week we will try to zoom in on regulatory interventions, so the actual design of how we control goods, services and market behavior in an attempt to avoid market failure. So we will discuss the handout in a later stage, so please pay attention. And today we will try to get our heads around the concept of responsive regulation. But before we touch upon responsive regulation proper, we will finish the grand tour. We will finish the story we started 3 weeks ago, in an attempt to identify, let's say, the realities we talk about. The realities of goods and services, the realities of roles, realities of governmental representatives, agents, civil servants, judges, legislative branches. And in doing so, we try to stick as much as possible to capitalist markets. So we're not talking about criminal law. I repeat, we are not talking about crimes as in the common crimes realm as lawyers identify that, murder, theft, and so forth. So we try to get a focus on market goods. We do so in an attempt to reach certain learning outcomes. This is a slide of week 1, just to refresh your memory. And today we look at theories of regulatory states, and in particularly responsive regulation, which is sort of label to a narrative, to a story that is told in state bodies to, let's say, get the policies aligned in such a way that it is effective, the control of the state on the market. So that is a theory that is part of the, let's say, decision-making table you will be part of. The last weeks we focused on that market failure. We collected some examples, and let's say we created sort of shared caricature of market failure being exploding machines, poisoned foods, unavailability of electricity during parts of the day, collapsing houses. So let's say the dramatic version of market failure, to get a sort of relevant picture in our hand. We identified this leading question as in, how could we, from the responsibility of the state, design a mechanism that effectively avoids market failure? We did so in the perspective of 2 things. One, that also the consumers have a role in avoiding market failure by the simple trick of not buying bad goods and services. So that is an important thing, and we will need that today. Because maybe the state has a role in providing information to the consumer so that they know that the goods and services are bad. But if the consumers ultimately decide not to purchase goods and services and accept market behavior that is not compliant, then the problem is solved. And so we should keep that in our mind, even if you are destined to be part of a state in one form or another, and that your salary will depend on a big state that makes everything a state concern. Yeah, so fair enough. Yeah, but keep the consumer in mind. That's one. And two, that the resources of a state are limited, so that the solution is most likely not that the state is going to steer and row, as in, let us, state, do the production of goods and services. And so you could think, well, if it is our concern that the consumers are happy, let's make the goods and services ourselves. But that is not the solution. Why is that not the solution? From the sort of resources perspective, we citizens do not want to pay enough taxes to make that all happen. And secondly, in history, we learned that states that try to give a full package, a sort of all-inclusive arrangement for their citizens, failed dramatically in that attempt. And one of these examples are communist regimes. We call them regimes because they locked up dissidents, and communist regimes tried to produce enough food and refrigerators, and the end of the row was that there were rows in front of shops because there was not enough refrigerators and food. And so those are the background facts and perspectives of the lead question, and maybe a sort of perspective on the word appropriate. We had a little intermezzo, remember, that we said, well, these are all sort of perspectives and theories from a certain profession. And you are about to embrace a certain profession, and that comes with sort of goodies and baddies. So it comes with sort of paradigms and frameworks and ideas, and all your lectures are implementing those ideas in your brain, as my lectures in law school did the same with me. And then the promise and the future and the hope in your generation is that you can mix those various perspectives. But if you want to talk to a lawyer, then maybe certain phrases of my voice should be in your repertoire. And if you want to talk to a sort of consultancy of administrative processes in organizations, then the voices of Mr. Koo and others are important, and so on. We had a story, a big theory, a narrative, the big drawing, trying to be a guide for the various chapters. And we are still in chapter 2 and 3 and 4. So we are still here. And we reflected on the sort of biggest perspective, the regulatory state, rowing and steering, last week, as in the sort of outcome or the current state of the thinking, and that is that the market should do the rowing, so they should get dirty hands and produce goods and services, and the steering should be on the side of the state. And so that is basically what the current state of thinking is. And the handout is, and we will discuss that after the break, is sort of expression of a big market, the market of the United States of America, and the chief of that country, the president, developed in 2 pages a sort of menu to design the steering. And on Blackboard there's an equivalent of the European Union, where there is a sort of consensus document of the 3 steering organs of the European Union, Parliament, Commission and Council, put together, drafted as a sort of intention document or a sort of memorandum of understanding that if the EU designs steering arrangements, that then certain criteria should be discussed. So basically today, next week and the week after, we try to get our hands around those criteria. What is then an appropriate arrangement? So, today we zoom in and we start to intervene, to steer, to actually make decisions on goods, services and market behavior, and how we control it. And we identify 3 steps. We identify the step of the creation of the norm. How should such a norm look like, technically? How do you technically design the civil servants that actually keep an eye on the compliance? And what toolbox do you give the regulator in supervising the compliance of the rules? So we take a closer look on the design of the steering of the state. Before we look into intervention, so to mingle in the market mechanism. So intervention is sort of the verb to intervene. I intervene, I state intervene in the market, as in that you do not trust the invisible hand enough, that you want to have a say. So that is intervention. And then there are two moments. And I want to throw Latin terms at you. And the two moments are ex ante and ex post. And those are critical concepts and basically part of your toolbox already, because you identify basically 4 steps in intervening in sort of affair, in this policy framework. I believe quarter 2 or quarter 3, you were introduced with sort of the policy design.
I think that was quarter 2.
Quarter 2? Who can share this with the class? What were those 4? So in political science or in safety security science, those 4 steps of your profession related to an issue with evaluation at the end? Yeah, the policy cycle?
Agenda setting, charges selection, implementation, evaluation.
Or are you using the 7th step?
4 or 5 steps.
Or 5 steps?
4 steps. Agenda setting, alternative selection,
Evaluation.
Exactly. So once more, clear and slowly. 1.
agenda setting,
Agenda setting.
alternative selection,
Alternative selection.
implementation,
And
evaluation.
evaluation. So lawyers have a more simplistic model. They divide their intervention, their concern with, let's say, reality, social reality in ex ante, prior, and ex post, after. And then the dividing line is the legal act. So, let's say in the classic situation of a divorce, one of the private law things we know, then the involvement of a jurist, of a legal professional, is then ex post. So, if it is a court case about a divorce, then that involvement of the jurist is ex post, so after the fact happened. Or with a tort, so wrongful act. So if there's a car accident, and if there's a court case after the car accident, then we call that the ex post intervention in the reality. And then the mirror position is the ex ante. So the ex ante involvement with the divorce is that you, prior to the marriage, already type out and have signed prenuptial agreements between the spouses, which deals with ex ante, so prior to the potential divorce. And with car accidents, let's say the legislative branch who designs traffic rules and zoning rules of how you should design streets and crossings, and that is ex ante intervention with a potential car accident later. So that is sort of the simplification of jurists. They cannot handle 4 steps, but you can easily recognize, let's say, the policy 4 steps in the ex ante ex post. And in the regulatory state, those 2 concepts have the following rule, or the following function, and that is that if you are in the ex ante phase, then there's not yet market failure. So everything that happens prior to market failure is ex ante. that is anticipating on potential market failure, and then you arrange your steering accordingly in the hope that no market failure happens. And then you have that there is market failure. So a exploded plant or a car or poisoned food and so forth. And then interventions of jurists, legal systems are exposed. So then there is injury, damage, death, environmental pollution and all kinds of stuff we do not like as a consequence of a market failure. And then we call that ex post. And obviously it's a circle. Because the moment you have an ex post intervention, a court ruling, a judge imposing a fine on a owner of a plant that exploded, then all future owners of plants know, whoa, we should take measures because otherwise if our plant explodes, then we get the same fine. So ultimately all ex post interventions have an ex ante effect. And obviously, the measurement of the performance of a market actor, ex post, is based on the ex ante rules and arrangement. And so what was then the obligation of a car designer or a food producer to assess whether he is non-compliant or that is a sort of act of God, you know, earthquake, volcano, eruption, of all kinds of other factors that could lead to market failure, collapses of houses and so forth. And so that is then the point there.